Hello guys, so this is my new channel, Healthy Vegan Cooking and Gardening, and those of you who subscribed are gonna be interested in our garden and what we're gonna cook from there. So today we're gonna make a green bean and a mushroom stir fry. So I already picked some green beans, but I'm gonna show you how we grow them. So let's have a look. Alright guys, so this is the field where we're growing potatoes from spring until middle of summer, and then the heat just kind of kills them with all the rain. And then we planted these beans, so we have green and yellow beans over here. So I already picked some of them earlier today, and as you can see, some of them have these dried leaves because we already experienced some frost about a week ago, and I tried to cover them with the plastic sheet. So some say that doesn't help, but I think it helps a little bit because those who were covered survived a little bit more. And so this is the size you want to look for. It's like pretty long, but you don't want to let them grow too long because then they get like really hard, so they just have to snap like this. But if you let them too long, they'll get kind of stringy and they're not so good for eating anymore. So now I'm gonna pick a few more here. They're really hard to see, you just have to look like under the leaves, and there they are. Some of them too small, pretty much just picking all of them. And we have also cabbage here, that's for another video. So let me give you some tips on growing the green beans. So unlike other plants, they don't require so much nitrogen and other nutrients because they can, I think, somehow get it from the air. So they're not like so heavy as, for example, the cabbages. So there are two kinds of beans that you can grow. There are these short ones that we are growing here. These are called bush beans, and then there are the other kind called pole beans, where they grow up really high up the pole, kind of like tomatoes. But for me that's just more work, and this is like so easy. You just plant them and then just look like this under the leaves and pick them. Okay, so pretty much they're so easy to grow. You plant them maybe 1 centimeter deep into the soil. They don't mind if you put them deeper because they have like a big seeds, pretty much like you put a whole bean in the ground. It grows from there. And spacing, I would space them maybe 10 centimeters apart. Maybe these ones are a little bit too close. Yeah, about 10 centimeters apart. They could do even maybe less, depends how quality soil you have. And they don't like competition, especially the big grasses that grow in the summer. So I'm using the hoe to kind of go around, that I'll show you later. So this is the tool that I use for removing the weeds. Before, also much work with removing weeds because I was doing it with the other hoe, but this one is so good. So just pretty much like a thing for the horses, and it's sharp at the end over here. So basically you have some weeds over here, you just go like this and it removes weeds very quickly, as you can see. So this tool I really recommend for weeding around any vegetables that you have, because especially for vegetables like this that grow really short, if you have weeds growing over it or you know, beside it, they compete for the sunlight and also the nutrients. So you want to weed around like between the rows with this one, and then in between them, if there is something growing, we just pull it out by hand and throw it away. So that's about it for growing green beans. They're very easy vegetable to grow. You can grow it 2 times or even more. They take about, I think, 60 days to mature from seed if they have good weather. But now we're getting in a colder weather, so we planted this actually beginning of August, so they should have been ready by the beginning of October, but because of the colder weather they're just coming up now at the end of October, so they took like 1 more month. I think there are a few of them actually ready, but yeah, at least 60 days in a warm weather, so the best time to plant them would be in spring, but just know that they need a higher soil temperature to sprout. I'm not sure how much, but if you're just coming out of the frost, they're not gonna sprout so easily. So I would wait pretty much till May or even June to plant them. The best is probably from June, and you will get them ready by the end of July, and they'll be growing very quickly. So the green beans or yellow beans also don't like so much heat. If it gets like anything over 25, especially over 30 degrees, they stop the production and they're not gonna get as many beans as you would have. And they produce like one time a lot, and we also actually had the beans on the other side of the greenhouse. They're producing like even more after, but not as much as the first time. So the first time you're gonna get like a really big harvest that we're not gonna know what to do with, but then they'll keep producing pretty much until the first frost. So these are pretty much all the tips I have for growing green beans. As I said, they're insanely easy crop to grow because you don't have to tie them unless you grow the pole beans, and just plant them and kind of weed around once in a while, and that's all you have to do. And the most important thing is pretty much to pick them on time, as I said, because if you let them a little bit longer, they get really stringy, and plus they'll develop the hard beans inside, which is not so great for cooking like this. And now we're gonna go into the kitchen to show you how we prepare them and how we cook with them. So let's go there.
Alright, and here I'm in the forest, only a short drive from our house, and I'm picking some wild edible boletus mushrooms that I'm gonna use in the recipe today.
Alright guys, so welcome inside in our vegan kitchen, and this is where we're gonna be making all of our awesome vegan recipes. So we have a nice cutting board here, and here is a stove for cooking. So today's recipe is gonna be a green bean and a mushroom casserole. So we have the beans that we picked earlier today. We have about, I would say, 1 kilo of beans, and over here about another kilo of wild mushrooms, but you can just use any mushrooms that you have. You can see the video I was picking earlier today. I'm pretty lucky to have a forest pretty near, so I can pick wild mushrooms. So let's start making the recipe. Alright, so once you pick your green beans, we're gonna start by removing the tops, because they're not really tasty, especially this side where it was connecting to the stem. So instead of chopping it with a knife, it's easier just to pinch it off like this with the nails. And then what you want to do is break it into at least half or even thirds, depends how big pieces you like. So in this case it's pretty long, I would break it into 3 pieces like this. It's much quicker than if you chop it with a knife, and then you just put it into another bowl. So this is probably the most boring part of the video, but trust me, if you don't remove these bits, it's not gonna be as tasty. And it only takes about 5 minutes to clean your beans. Let's go. You can also notice that some of the greens might be too old. Like this one is definitely very starchy and very stringy. So if it has like a hard shell like this, it's not good for cooking, and you just put it in the trash. Alright guys, so I just finished cutting and chopping off the ends of these beans. It took me about, I think, 10 minutes. It's not the funniest work. So I have about 1 kilo of beans right here. So it doesn't matter if you have more or less, you can always adjust the recipe. And if you have like too much, for example, you are in the middle of May and you have like a big harvest, or middle of summer, then you can just freeze them, which is the best way, and then you can make this recipe anytime you want, even in the winter. But now we have a smaller harvest because it's getting colder and they're not producing so much. So now we're just gonna rinse them and then cook them until they're soft, which is gonna take probably about 20 minutes. So I just put the beans in the cooker over here. You can just put enough water so they're covered, and then bring them to boil. And then once they're boiling, you can lower the heat. And then after about 10 minutes, you should check on them. And if they are pretty soft, you should take them out, because you don't want to completely overcook them, because after this we're gonna bake them in a casserole. Alright guys, so while our beans are cooking, we're gonna prepare our sauce in the pan with the mushrooms. So we're gonna start by chopping up some onion and about 3 or 4 cloves of garlic. Alright guys, so now we're gonna start sauteing our onion and garlic. So we turn on the heat on medium high. So on our, it's number 7, as you can see. And we're just gonna saute it like this without any oil. And if it's gonna start sticking to the bottom of the pan, we're gonna add a little bit of water. And now we're gonna add a little bit of our spices. So we're adding the black pepper here, a little bit of chili, and keep stirring, some ginger, and you can add any spices you like. So we have here basil. Then we have a little bit of dill, and oregano. Now we're adding some garlic powder. And a little bit of smoked paprika. Instead of water, you can just add some soy sauce. Okay. Yeah. So now you can see I didn't add any water, and we're just sauteing it to bring up the flavor here. And once your onion and garlic gets a bit translucent, you can start adding your mushrooms. You can a little bit add half of it if you have too much, and they will soak up all the water because they're like sponge. And once they get a little bit smaller, you can add the rest of the other ones. So now you can add a little bit water. So you don't want to add too much water, because then if you add too much water, you will just the mushrooms won't soak in any of the water, and it's not gonna be it will be too watery for the casserole. So you just wanna stir them without much water first. But if you don't see any water left, you can add a little bit more. So you always want to have a little bit of water at the bottom so your mushrooms don't get burnt. After you stir your mushrooms in a bit, you can add a little bit more salt. And again, you have to keep stirring, because if you just let it be, it will stick to the bottom and it's gonna taste burnt. So once our mushrooms got loosened up and watery and it's kind of like a sauce, we're gonna add flour. So we're using the rye flour, and we're adding slowly tablespoons by tablespoons and mixing at the same time. So we're gonna add about 5 tablespoons. So first we're adding 3, and then we're just gonna mix it. And this will just make it pretty thick. Yeah. So important is to mix it so the flour doesn't clog into clumps. I think for now it's about right. So first you add about 3 tablespoons of rye flour. Yeah. So now we're gonna add about 2 cups of milk. We have this jar, and slowly add it in.
Unsweetened almond milk.
Yeah.
But you can add whatever unsweetened milk you want.
Yeah. So and just keep mixing it in and slowly stir it so all the flavors get in there. Alright, so now we want the right consistency, which is not too thick and not too watery. So you see, kind of has to be like this, because this is gonna be poured over the beans. So this is gonna be like the sauce for the casserole. So if it's too thick, you have to add more milk, and if it's too watery, you have to add more flour. So you just have to find the right consistency. And now we're just gonna cook it for 5 more minutes so the mushrooms get cooked up properly and all the flour gets infused in there. And during the process you can be adding more milk or more flour according to the needs, but right now we have perfect consistency, but we'll probably have to add a little bit more milk, I would say. Alright, so after 5 minutes you wanna give it a taste. So ours definitely needs more salt. So if you're doing very low sodium, you don't have to add any salt. Alright, so as we're cooking, we noticed that the water evaporated. So if you have vegetable stock, you can add the vegetable stock, but we don't have, so we're just adding some water. And again, you don't want it to be too thick or too watery, just kind of enough, so we pour it over the beans. And again, taste it with the salt, how it is. Yeah, now it's pretty salty as well. Alright, so our stir fry mushrooms are finished. You can see the consistency. It should be like this. It's pretty watery, it's like pretty saucy. And now we're gonna preheat the oven to 200 degrees Celsius or about 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And now we're gonna assemble our casserole. So first we're gonna put our beans here. You see, we only covered about half of the casserole, so preferably you wanna have bigger dish. But now we have a lot of sauce, a lot of mushrooms here. Oh my goodness. It's gonna be more sauce than beans here. Right. So we put it here. And now we're just gonna mix it with the beans. Alright, and now we're gonna put some breadcrumbs on top. Alright, that's about it. And now we're gonna bake it for 15 minutes on 200 degrees Celsius. Alright, so it's been about 15 minutes and you can see the breadcrumbs on top kind of got brown. So that's the sign it's ready. And now we're just gonna taste it. So here we have a mushroom. It's really hot right now. It's pretty good. So now we're just gonna enjoy it with some rice or some other grains, and it's a really good recipe if you have a lot of green beans and mushrooms at the same time. So it's a very simple recipe and doesn't take more than 45 minutes to an hour depending how quick you are, but once you know how to do it, you know, it's very easy. And it's just pretty much 2 ingredients and plus flour and a little bit of soy milk. So I highly recommend this recipe. Let me know if you're gonna try it and let me know how you like this channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Shit's pretty watery.